Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jess with So Many Creations. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make my Lola XL with the add-on pattern. I'm super excited about this one. It was an idea that kind of came into my head one day when I was thinking about doing another Zoom class. I don't know why, but I couldn't just do something simple. I just never can. So my Lola pattern, if you're not familiar, is this one right here. And I love this bag. This has been a fan favorite. It's been popular pretty much since I wrote the pattern 2 or 3 years ago now. It's been a few years. And I love this pattern because it's simple. It has just a top and bottom for the outside, great to show off cork or fabric that you really love. It has an adjustable handle, a recessed zipper, and then inside it has one zippered pocket and a center divider. So it's just a very basic bag. But there's been a couple things that have always bugged me about this bag since the pattern came out. First, I love the bag, but it always felt small to me. And I know that that's why it's been so popular, because it's smaller. For me, especially back when I wrote the pattern, it was way too small. I could not fit all my things in here. So I wanted it to be just a little bit bigger, as did many of my customers. And they requested that I do just a slightly larger version. It was great, but it just needed a little bit of tweaking. So that's when we did the Lola XL pattern, which is basically just this size, but this style right here. So we took this, turned it into this, added a little bit to the width, a little bit to the depth, and a little tiny bit to the height. And it was great. Everybody has been making these and absolutely loving doing the larger version. But I decided that I wanted to do a Zoom class and include the Lola, because it's so popular, as my next kind of topic, as my next class project. But I didn't want it to just be the plain old Lola. I didn't want it to just be the Lola XL. I wanted it to be something better, something that would really make people want to join the class, and also just something that would make me happy, which is adding outside pockets. I don't know why. I really can't answer that, but why didn't I ever have pockets on the original? I have no idea. I didn't even do pockets when I put measurements out to do the larger bag, and I also don't know why. So on this one, I did all the pockets. So it does have a wider handle, which the Lola XL does. The original Lola has a 1/2 inch. This has a 1 inch. On the front, I did a really cool double zip pocket. And I love this because the construction is actually super easy. It's a single zipper and panel, but it becomes 2 pockets when you're all done. Nice and pretty inside. It is not fully finished on the back, so it makes it even easier, beginner friendly, and it also helps with bulk on your machine. But that wasn't enough, because you spoke and I heard you wanted a pocket on the back, some sort of slip pocket. And a customer of mine had a really great scoop pocket idea that she used on one of hers, and I kind of borrowed it. So thank you, Sally. So I took the bag, I gave it a back pocket, I gave it a front pocket, I gave it a 2-color handle, which I think is just super fun because we have 2 fun corks, why not use them both? And then on the top, we're going to do a cork recess zipper. So I'm super excited about this. I cannot wait to share this pattern with you. If you need to grab the original pattern or the add-on pattern, because remember, they work together as a team, you can get either of those or both right here on my website. If you already have the original Lola, no need to buy it again. I don't like doing that to you. You just can buy the add-on pattern. If you haven't made a Lola, it's time. It's definitely your time to do one. And now you'll have the option to basically make 3. If you buy the combo pattern pack, you'll get the original Lola pattern. You'll get the XL pattern that makes a bigger version of this. And you'll get the XL add-on pattern that also has the fun pockets. So it's kind of a 3-in-1. If you already have the original Lola, you could definitely adapt some of these pockets for that. I did not do that in the pattern. So if you have any questions or if any of that is unclear, don't hesitate to email me. I'll drop that right here. You can always contact me if you have questions. So before we get started, now that you've seen all the great features of this bag, I just have to do a little show and tell. This is the first completed sample that I made, and I'm still in love with this bag. I hope at the time that you're watching this video that these corks are still available because they flew off the shelves. They're actually on order again right now, and we ordered a lot. These were from our cork club that we had in October of 2024. I don't know when you're watching this video. So if you like these corks or these corks, you can probably, hopefully, find find them on my website, maybe at that point there'll be even more. One of the other things I wanted to show you real quick, and then we're going to get into our video, is that if you are unsure of your top stitching on your machine, if you are working on a domestic or you have a machine that just doesn't love a lot of thick layers, you have a couple options with the handles. And this is not something I'm going to go over in depth in the video. I didn't include it in the pattern. I just want to share it with you now, and I'll probably show you again at the end. On this finished sample, I went ahead and I did my entire bag. I turned it, I top stitched all the way around, and I actually added my handle on with rivets. I added some really nice strap ends. I just threw that one on the floor, and I added it on with rivets. So there's definitely some options, and we'll talk about that when we get into the video. All right, I think I've talked enough. Let's start making our Lola XL. If you like videos like this, don't forget to click subscribe, hit the notification bell, and give it a thumbs up. All right, let's go make a bag. I went ahead and cut all of the pieces that I'm going to need for today for the add-on option 2. So in your Lola XL add-on pattern, the first page is going to talk about the option number 1. And that is basically just doing a larger size of the original Lola pattern. It's going to be the same 2-color outside. The handle is wider and a few of the dimensions have changed, obviously since it's bigger, but also for the zippered pocket, divider, corners, etc. But that is just an enlarged version of the original. For today, in this video, I'm going to do option 2. And option 2 is the bag that I showed you that has the zippered pocket on the front, and it also has a scoop pocket on the back. So for today, I'm not going to be getting in depth into the lining. I've decided to go ahead and skip the divided pocket, and I don't know if I'm doing the zippered pocket or not yet. I don't think I'm going to, and if I do, I won't be doing a full tutorial on that in this video, just because I've already done that in the original Lola video, and if you need that, I will make sure that's linked for you so you can check that out. What I'm going to do is go through the steps to make the outside, because that is the part that's really different. So let's go through the pieces that I have. You're going to follow along on your pattern, which is going to be on page 2, and that's going to give you all of the information that you need for your pieces. These pieces are cut specifically for the Lola XL. I did not include in the pattern any of this, like the extra outside pockets and the 3-color outside for the original Lola, which is the smaller one. I'm sorry if that gets confusing, but it just didn't make sense to me to write a brand new pattern when I'm basically just redoing the outside and using the same inside. So let's go through the pieces that we have here, and then we'll start making both of our outside pockets. So the first piece I have is A. Also, one other note, the letters are going to be a little bit wonky just because I tried to use the original letters from the Lola Crossbody pattern as much as I could, because there was already an outside, a top and a bottom, a lining, etc. So some of the letters are going to be weirdly out of order. Just pay attention when you're doing your cutting and make sure that you mark everything, and that's going to help you. So I've marked on the back of each piece with a heat erasable pen so I can get rid of it. Not that any of this is going to show, but if I want to, I can remove the letters. Anyway, let's get back into it. So we have A. A is going to be for the front main center. This is where the zipper is going to sit above. So essentially the zippered pocket is kind of behind here, the fabric part, but this is going to be the part that is in the middle of the front. So I have one piece for A. I'm using cork as the pattern calls for, so none of these cork pieces are interfaced. I have my B, which is going to be for the 2-color handle. I do have 2 of these cut. I'm just going to grab them both right now. I have one from my print and one from my accent. I will be putting these together before I do my top stitching, and we'll go over that when we get to that step. So I have one B from each of my print and color. I also have 2 pieces right here. This is going to be H and I. Now they are labeled different, but they are the same size. One is going to be the back. One is going to be the front of the scoop pocket. They start out the same size, and one of them will get trimmed. So I have H and I have I. Those are both going to be out of my print. These are going to be the middle section on the back of the bag. I also have my 2 J pieces right here. These are going to be on the side of the H and I. So this is also for the back. And then I have the tabs that I'm going to need for the front part. So I have 2 of my Ks. These are going to be for the outside of the zipper. This is how we're going to kind of finish those ends. And I have L, I couldn't remember. This is for the center of the zipper. This is how we're going to make our single zipper into 2 zippers for 2 pockets. Out of my accent cork, aside from my B strap, I also have 2 pieces that are C. C is going to be for the outside bottom, so I've got a front and a back. 2 of these that are the same size. I've also got 2 M pieces. These are going to be for the front and back for the top. So the top and bottom will be my green. The middle section with all the pockets is going to be my print. I have right here piece N. Piece N is going to be for my adjustable handle tab. So I'm making my handle as a trifold. So I'm doing the tab as a double fold. That's why, like the original pattern has you do, what I normally do is sew and do all of my top stitching and then cut a piece for the tab. I'm not going to do that because that would make this part kind of thick. This would end up being 6 layers that you would be sewing into the final seam. Instead, this will be 4 and it's a little bit more manageable. So I have N for my tab, for my adjustable handle. And then I have for the lining, my G pieces. There's 4 right here. These are going to be for the recessed zipper. So I'll have 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. Those are going to go onto my lining piece D. So I have those cut. Even though I'm really not going to do a lot with the lining today, I did want to get my lining pieces. This is water resistant cotton. So it does have a little bit of like a heavier back to it. If this was standard quilter's cotton, I would also interface it. Since this is a nice weight, I'm not going to interface it. Also, this bag is a nice size, but it's not huge, so I don't feel the need to. If you like an overly structured bag or you are using, like I said, cotton or a linen or anything else, you may want to go ahead and add some interfacing. That's going to be a personal call, and also how much can your machine handle? My machine is totally fine with the cork outside and this on the inside, so I did not interface this. This is from mormino.com. I will put her website down below. This is, I know the color is mint and it's daisy and I forget what the name of it is, but I purchased this a few months ago. Not that that really matters. You might be watching this video 3 years from now, but I told you anyway. The last 2 pieces I have from my lining are actually for the outside because I did not cut the divider, which is, let me see, F, and I did not cut the square for my zippered pocket, which is piece E. I skipped those because I'm not going to do them in today's bag. So I have right here piece O and P. These are going to be the backing parts for my zippered pocket, the bigger one, and also for my scoop pocket. So these are actually for the outside of the bag. You could use pretty much anything that you want. If you want to save some bulk in your seams, what I've done for most of the other samples is that I just use an Essex linen, which is very lightweight, just gives me the finishing part that I need, but doesn't add a lot of bulk. You could also use quilter's cotton or really anything you want. Bag making is personal, but it's also a matter of what can my machine handle. So I cut all of these from the water resistant cotton. I know that my machine will have no problem with it. Okay, so now that we've got all of our pieces cut out, let's go ahead and take a look at the hardware and the zippers we're going to need. So for the hardware and the zippers, there's really not a whole lot that you're going to need. I have my zipper here that's going to be for the recessed zippered top. I grabbed the measurement from the pattern and I added my pull on. I already have this one ready to go and I will be working on this in a later step. This one right here is going to be for the front outside zippered pocket. We're going to be working on this one shortly. This one I did not add my pulls onto because we're going to do a little bit of sewing and add some cork to this before we put the pulls on. This zipper is cut intentionally longer, and if yours is even longer than what the pattern says, that is fine. I'm giving you a lot of wiggle room with this particular zipper, and you'll see why when we get to it. Just because we have to do some sewing, add our pulls, etc. I want to make sure that there's no stress here, and if you end up cutting something short or needing to adjust something, you still have room. So this is going to be for the pockets in the front. I've got my 2 pulls. I have my adjustable hardware here for my handle. It is a 1-inch finished handle, so I have a rectangle and a slide. I also have a handmade tag, totally optional, but I'll show you a good place where you can add that. And I grabbed some rivets because generally I use a lot of rivets when I'm doing handles Not necessary, not called for in the pattern. You can sew your handles and do all of this bag with just stitching, but I grabbed some rivets because I usually add 1 or 2 just because I like how they look and they're a little bit quicker. For this project, we're also going to need all of our basic sewing supplies. So I have my ruler and rotary cutter. I have my scissors, my marking tools. I have a chalk pencil, which I don't think I need today since none of my cork has a dark backing, but I also have my heat erasable friction pen, lots of clips as always, 1/8 inch tape, which is going to be important for doing our assembly and also for the zipper. I use a lot of 1/8 inch tape. I also have my thread. I think for today, I'm going to use this really cool wizardry thread, which is in color grooving. It's a rainbow, but it's a neon rainbow. And I just think it kind of goes with this the whole look that I have going on here. I think it'll be fun for top stitching. I also am going to be sewing on my Janome HD9. So I have my 1/4 inch compensating foot here, but I also have my 1/8 inch that I'm going to use for top stitching. So I will be using both of these and kind of working back and forth. If you're using your standard domestic machine, you will want something that will do 1/4 inch for your seam allowance and also 1/8 inch for some top stitching and some edge stitching, whatever feet you prefer to use. I am using a Tex 35 for my machine for top and bobbin. If you're using a domestic, I would recommend nothing lighter than a 40 weight. You could even use a Tex 35 like this if you wanted to. I do love these polyester threads for bag making. They stand out really nicely as top stitching, but they also hold up really well. Other than that, it's really just basic supplies. If I do put in any rivets, I will have my hole punch and my rivet press, probably just my handheld because it's easier. And that's about it. And a seam ripper because I'm always going to need a seam ripper. And I almost forgot one of my favorite tools. This is my box corner template. I will be using that today when I mark and cut my corners. You can use your regular ruler and pen. You can use scissors or a rotary cutter. I love doing my corners with this template because it's just so much easier to mark. Those are available on the website. You do have a few color options and they are made to order. So if you would like one, I will make sure the website's linked for you here again. And I think that's it. I think it's time to get into our bag. So let's grab our pattern and get started. Before we jump into the pattern, I just wanted to kind of reiterate one more time, because this is an add-on pattern, it is not a complete pattern. So not everything is going to be included from start to finish like a regular pattern that I sell does. This works in conjunction with the regular Lola XL pattern. So for example, when I'm looking now at page 3 and I'm ready to start, it says for step 1, fusing, and it's going to refer me back to the original pattern. All it's going to let me know is that cork does not need interfacing, and anything else that I would use for the lining that needs interfacing, I should go ahead and do that now. But step 1 does not have explicit instructions. Now, step 2, on the other hand, for the handles, which is where we're going to start, is going to walk you step by step like I normally do. This pattern does not bounce back and forth a lot, mostly because we're going to be making the outside, and then when it's time for the lining, that's when you're going to grab your original pattern. But just so that you know, when you purchase a pattern such as this, which on my website is $3, it's not including everything because they work together. So it's a complement to the original pattern. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on our handle. This is going to be a 2-color handle, and it's not a 2-color the way that you probably think, where it has a top and a bottom that are different colors. This is going to be one print or color in the center and a different color on each end. And then because of the way that it wraps around with the hardware on it, you kind of get a little bit of both depending on what angle you're looking at. And I think it was kind of a fun idea. We needed 2 strips to make the handle anyway, so why not do 1 and 1? If this isn't your cup of tea, you can totally make it out of one color. You can do it however you would like. So what I did is I left one of my B's out of my print. I left that alone. I did not trim that down. My B that I have from my solid, I just cut in half, and I didn't even measure it. I just kind of folded it and trimmed it really quickly. So what I'm going to do is sew onto each end one of these green strips so that I can make one long strip, and then I'll be ready to top stitch. So I'm going to do it at a 45-degree angle, kind of like I would do binding. If you're a quilter, that will make sense. If not, I'll show you how I get this marked and ready to go. So I'm just going to move this over so it's right in the center. I'm putting my 2 pieces right sides together, and before I do anything, I always check every single time just to make sure. So if I draw my line this way, when it's sewn, it's going to look like that, and that's what I want. I don't want to draw it the wrong way. I've done that enough times. So I'm just gonna add a clip so these two pieces stay nice and straight. And I'm gonna take my box corner ruler. You can use your regular ruler as well. And I'm gonna use the 45-degree line in the center. And I'm just gonna line this up and just mark, because I have tried to do this just like eyeballing it, which if you've watched any of my videos, you know that that's kind of my way. I wing everything. This time though, I never get it straight and then I get weird curves in my handle. So why not just mark it? So now I've got that marked. I'm gonna do the same on the other side. And I'm not really fussy about my angles going in the same direction. I just kind of mark them one on each end, and then I know that they go opposite. I don't really care. You can be as particular as you want. I am not here to judge you, as long as you don't judge me. We'll just kind of call it a truce. So, all right, that piece is a little bit crooked there. I'm just kind of lining that up. And this one, again, I want it to go this way, so I actually want the corner I clipped, I want to do it this way. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this lined up. Just a 45-degree angle, that's all we're doing. And we'll just slide this over and finish. All right, so at my machine, I'm going to stitch right on this line. I'm gonna check it one more time before I cut anything, and if I've got it correct, I will trim this excess off to about 1/4 inch. I'm going to open that seam up. I can either press it with my iron and my clapper, I can use my 1/8 inch tape, or I can top stitch it if I want, which I've done that a few times and I think it looks kind of cool. Totally unnecessary, and it's really just for me, but I think it looks nice. So I'm gonna take this to the machine, get this all stitched and trimmed and ready to go, and then we'll talk about how to fold this so it's ready for top stitching. So now that my stitching is all done, I went ahead and I did my diagonal seams on both ends. I trimmed up to about 1/4 inch. I did lay my seam flat and I top stitched mine. You can see I added just a little bit of stitching there. It is totally not necessary. You can just lay your edges flat and open, either by pressing them and using your pressing clapper, or you can add some 1/8 inch tape underneath. The top stitching is totally optional. I just thought it looked kind of cute. So now that I have that ready, I grabbed my ruler and my pen and I made a mark 1 inch over from the long edge all the way down. So I've got that mark. What you want to do is measure the finished width of the handle, which is going to be 1/3 of your width right now. So this is 3 inches. I need my finished handle to be 1 inch. So I just measured over 1 inch and I drew a line. Now I'm going to take my 1/8 inch tape, place that on the opposite side right here. And I'm just gonna run a line of tape all the way down to the end. It's not perfectly straight and it's not right on the very edge. It doesn't matter, it's just gonna help me to get this started. I really wanna push that down so I can get my paper off without pulling the tape off. So I'm just gonna get that. All right. And at this point, I have also not trimmed off selvages. I will worry about that when I'm all done top stitching. So now I have my tape there. I'm gonna go ahead and peel my paper off. You can just do a little bit at a time, or you can take all of it off, whatever is easier for you. And I am going to flip this. I just find it's always easier to fold away from me than towards me. I'm not really sure why. So I'm gonna fold this edge right to the line. I don't wanna go past the line. I wanna go right up to it. And I'm just using a little bit of pressure and that tape, push that down. All right, so all the way down. And then I'm going to either use another piece of tape on this side or my clips. My clips are right here, so that's what I'm gonna do. Conserve a little bit of tape and take these out. And I'm just gonna fold this edge right over, and it shouldn't be past the fold. It should be just right up to it, enough that an 1/8 inch top stitching will catch it. So let me put a few more clips in and then I can zoom it in for you. So I'm just getting it nice and tight here. So you can see I am really close to the edge, but I'm not over it. I don't want this raw edge hanging over. It kind of makes a front and a back to the handle, but it also hides the raw edge. You can clip on either side. I would suggest clipping all the layers. There we go. And you just want to kind of push that down. and we're gonna clip all the way down until it's ready to go. Once I have this prepared, I'm gonna take it to the sewing machine and I'm gonna sew both of my long edges 1/8 of an inch. I'm also gonna do 1/4 of an inch, which is optional, but I love how the double top stitching looks. While I'm at the machine, I'm also going to grab my end piece. This is for the tab. This is only going to be a double fold, so I'm just gonna fold mine in half. The reason I fold it in half, even though it has a raw edge now, is so that my top stitching looks the same. If I fold my edges in towards the middle, my top stitching looks different, and that kind of bugs me more than the raw edges. Totally up to you how you want to do that. But I'm going to fold that in half. So I have a 3-inch high by 1 inch wide strip. I'm going to do the same exact top stitching I do on this. When these are all set, I'll be ready to add my hardware. My handle and my tab are all top stitch, and I'm ready to add hardware. Everything that I'm going to be doing to my handle and my tab can be done at the machine. I am going to rivet mine just because that's my choice for this bag, and it saves a little bit of time. You can definitely stitch if you want to, and I'll show you where you're going to stitch when that time comes. So let's do our little tab first. That one's going to be a little bit easier. So you're going to take your rectangle ring and you're just going to loop your ring right through and just fold it in half. You're going to stitch down here about 1/8 of an inch, and then you're going to stitch as close to your ring as you can, just to make sure that this is not, going back and forth. We don't want it to flip on us. So I'm just going to add a clip right here for now. That way I am ready to add my rivet. So again, you're going to fold it in half, stitch 1/8 down at the bottom, and as close to the rectangle ring as you can. For your slide, you're going to grab one of the ends of your handle, and I'm just going to clean it up a little bit, make sure it looks good, it's ready to go. Grab my lighter, just get all these ends and threads all ready. I'm going to take my slide right here, and this is what I would call the front of my handle. That's where the shorter edge is back here. So I have the front of my handle and I have kind of the front or nicer side of my slide. I'm going to take my handle and go up right here and bring it right back down over the center bar, just like that. Slide this down maybe 1 inch or so. I don't really use any specific measurement. And I'm going to fold this down and top stitch right here. Just stitch back and forth a few times to kind of hold that in place. There's no need to stitch closer to the hardware. You just have to stitch down at the bottom. For me, I'm going to add a rivet here. So now that I have these prepped, I'm going to go ahead and add my rivets. I've got my hole punch right here set on 2.5. I'm just going to add 1. You can add 2 if you want. I think just 1 in the middle is going to be good for me. And I can also reinforce it with some stitching if I want to. So there is my hole, maybe about 1/2 inch up right in the center. Do the same thing for my tab here. For the tab, I may still do the stitching down at the bottom, but I'm going to put a rivet right in the center, just low enough that it's not going to get in the way of the rectangle ring. I don't want to not be able to close my rivets. So there's that. I'm gonna grab my rivets. I just think that rivets add a really nice look to your bag, plus it just saves me a little bit of stitching. Not that it's that much stitching, but you know. So I'm gonna put my rivet through here. These are 8mm double cap rivets with 8mm posts. So they fit really nicely through 4 to 6 layers of cork. And I'm using my Cam Snap handheld rivet press with the dies in there. Get this one all set. So this one's gonna go through 6 layers of cork, and it still has just enough room. You don't want your rivet too tall because then your post is either going to be crooked or it might leave a dent when you're all done. And that's not what we want. So I'm gonna set that. So now that those are all done, or now that your stitching is all done, I kind of fold my handle in half, make sure that I don't have any twists. I'm gonna take my tab, just kind of slide that on, that's gonna stay loose. This end of my handle will get sewn in. This still has some selvage, and I will trim that when that time comes. I'm just gonna leave that for now so none of my threads are loose, because I did all my back stitching kind of right there, so I will take care of that before I put it in the bag. Now I'm just gonna take this end and do the same thing. I'm gonna go up and over the other half of the handle. So just like this, and then back over, and there we go. So that's how that looks. There's my tab on the end here. I can take my clip off. This is ready to be put into my finished bag as soon as I'm done. For step 3A, we are going to be making the front zippered pocket. So there's going to be multiple steps to this pocket, and we're going to start out with one of these smaller items right here. This is the zipper that I'm going to need. This is the one I don't have any pulls on yet. It's going to be much easier to add my piece in the center, and then I will add my pulls. That can be a little bit tricky, which is why this is overcut. So what I did is I went ahead and found the center of my zipper. I just folded it in half and marked. I marked mine with a Sharpie just because nothing else will write on this metallic zipper and it's not going to show. So don't worry about what you mark there. I have piece L. This is your tiniest little piece that you have. And I put some double stick tape on the back. I'm just going to peel my paper off now. And I'm going to get this prepped to stitch down. And I'm just going to fold it into the center. You can definitely measure and make a marking. I'm just eyeballing it. I'm back to eyeballing. So I'm just folding it over about 1/4 inch. Again, mark the center if that makes it easier for you. And then I think I folded a little bit too far. I do that every time. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Just a little bit less. And then I'm going to fold this side over. I think this is the fussiest part of the entire bag just because this piece is so tiny. Okay, so there is my L. That's my seam right there, and I'm going to put it so that the seam is facing down. I'm going to use a little bit of tape right in the middle of the zipper, like that. I'm going to stick this down so I can go over to the machine and top stitch. So I'm just going to put that right in the middle there. You will notice that my L piece is a little taller than the zipper, and that's fine. Again, I did a lot of this on, I did all of it on purpose. The reason that this is taller than the zipper is so that you have, again, some wiggle room, but also because there's variances in zippers. I didn't want it to be too short, depending on what zipper you're using. Mine is just maybe 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch off on each side. I'm just getting that as centered as I can, as straight as I can, and then I will go ahead and trim when I'm all set. So the first thing I'm going to do is at the machine, I'm just going to sew down both of these long sides 1/8 of an inch to hold this in place. Once that's done, we will talk about putting the zipper pulls on and completing the zipper. So I've got my center strip top stitched in place. Now I'm going to add my pulls, and then once I have those on, we'll do a little bit of trimming. Because this can be a little bit tricky, I made sure that you have extra wiggle room for your zipper. So if you have an issue with doing pulls like this, where you have to put them in towards each other and you don't want to get a bubble because we want our pocket to look nice, what you can do is open up your zipper and you can just trim tiny little bit off of one side, just like that. I took off maybe 1/4 inch. And by doing that, it helps me to get this lined up straighter. So I'm going to take my pull with the two sides. It's got the center right here. And I'm going to put the longer side in first, grab that, and then get my shorter side in. And then before I put that on, I'm just going to kind of fuss with it. And I like to put it down just so I can see if it's straight, to see if it looks like there's a bow in the middle. So I get that in there. This side definitely is bowing, so I need to pull that back a little bit, straighten it out. And what I think is that I actually want to trim a little tiny bit more. I think if I do that, it's going to give me just the right amount of room. So I took off maybe another 1/8 inch. That way I can get that started. And that looks pretty straight. That looks good to me. This is not bowing, it's nice and straight here, and I don't have kind of crooked teeth, as funny as that sounds. All right, now I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. Again, I'm gonna open it up. I'm gonna take a little more than 1/4 off. All right. Put my longer side in first. Grab a hold of that. Put my short side in. kind of take a look. This still looks bowed. I'll pull that back. If I fuss with it now, instead of getting the pull on and not being happy, then I can kind of make my adjustments, because the more I keep pulling at this nylon zipper, the more I'm going to fray it. So I just kind of want to take my time. Get that. It's perfectly lined up. There we go. I heard it click. Okay. And there, and I'm happy. I think those look good. My zipper tape is nice and straight and there's no bows. So now that I have this all prepared this way, before I can put my tabs on, I need to do a little bit of trimming. So I'm going to use the pattern measurement. I'm just gonna line this up in the center of that measurement on my mat, and I'm gonna chop off my ends, making them nice and straight. And then I did my trimming. Again, I placed this kind of centered on the center mark of my measurement. That way, when I get this finished, I have even sides. I want to make sure that it's not like this, because we want 2 even pockets. And if something gets trimmed too small, you don't want your pocket to be unusable. We have to at least be able to get our hand in there. So I've got that trimmed to the size the pattern tells me. I am just going to take my lighter and just kind of run that along those edges just a little bit. This kind of zipper tends to fray a little bit more as I set fire to YouTube. So I just like to give it a little bit of a singe. Okay, so I've got my K tabs. These are again out of my main print, and there's only going to be tabs on the front of this. This pocket has a lining piece that you will see when you open the zippers, but it doesn't have a lining on the back. So the back is going to be the raw back of the cork, and it's also going to be these tabs without a piece of fabric behind them. They're so far on the end that you really don't even notice, but just so that you know, if you're looking for an extra piece, there is not one. So I'm just gonna place my tape right on here. And I had mentioned earlier that these pieces for this step were overcut. That included not only the zipper, but these tabs. These tabs are about twice as long as they actually need to be, just so that if something went wrong here and you needed to trim your zipper down substantially, or even if you wanted to take an inch or 2 off of your zipper and not do the center, you could do that as well. Make this into one pocket with a single or double pull. Whatever the case may be, I gave you some wiggle room so you wouldn't lose anything when creating this piece. Sometimes getting pulls on can be so nerve-wracking, especially after you've sewn, because before you sew anything, it doesn't count as much. Do you know what I mean? Once this is on, I gotta get these pulls on and they have to look good. If I keep fraying the ends of my zipper and I have to cut too much off, I don't wanna mess that up. So these are definitely going to be a lot longer than they need to be, but that's okay. So I'm gonna take my tape off. Or my paper. I say that every single video. Take the paper off, and I'm going to place my tabs right side down. The tabs are also overcut as far as the height is concerned. So the tabs are taller this way than the zipper, not by a lot. Again, depends on the zipper, but I've left you some room for trimming. So I have those taped down in place. I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch right here. And then what I'm going to do is just fold each of these back on itself, and I'm going to top stitch 1/8 inch. I'll get those all set and I'll be back to show you how that looks. My outside pocket zipper is all set. I have my centerpiece stitched in. I put my K tabs right side together. I stitched 1/4 inch and I open them up and top stitch 1/8 inch. Now, before I start adding the rest of my pieces, I need to do a little bit of trimming. So I'm going to be trimming the edges here on all of the tabs even with the zipper. So whatever your zipper width is, you're going to make that nice and straight right across here. Zippers are typically around 1.25 inches or so, but since they can vary, that's why I'd rather start larger and then trim down. Once I have that done, I'm going to check the measurement in the pattern, and I'm going to be trimming off on either end here. I will be trimming off a substantial amount, as I had mentioned earlier. I need this entire unit to be the same width as the pieces it's getting sewn to, and that measurement is in your pattern. So I'll be right back after I do some trimming. So I've got my zipper all trimmed down. I grab my tape, of course, my clips, and I have the rest of the pieces I'm going to need to complete the front here. So I have piece A, which is going to be the center. I have piece M for the top, piece C for the bottom, and then I have my P lining fabric. So I'm going to be starting with the top, kind of working my way down, and my lining fabric. So I have M, which is gonna go here, and my lining, which is gonna go in the back. So first thing I'm going to do is put a little bit of tape on my cork here. That's clips, not tape. Let's try this. I'm gonna grab my tape and I am going to add this to the top of the zipper. We're gonna be making a little sandwich. If you have directional cork at all, I would recommend kind of laying the pieces out in the finished direction that they're gonna go, and then you'll know which way to put them. So if this is the top of my piece, it'll get sewn like this, and then it'll be right side up when it's done. So I've got my M with tape on it. I'm gonna take that off. I'll line this up here. And this is not going to line up great because of the zipper pulls. You are gonna be moving them as you sew, regardless of what foot you have, just because it's a little tricky because they kind of push the zipper in different directions and they push your top here. So we're just gonna get this lined up as best as possible. I'm a little short down here, so I'll get that. You can also add clips if need be. I find that tape and clips kind of work as a good combo for me. So there's my M piece. Now on the back here, I'm going to add my lining fabric. Again, this is gonna be the top. I'm not working with directional fabric, but you'll wanna make sure that you're paying attention if you are. So that's gonna be what I call the top. And so I want this to be right sides together with that cork. I want it on the back of the zipper. So I'm just gonna take this, get that lined up, add my clips. And once I get those clipped in place, I will take this over to the sewing machine and stitch 1/4 inch all the way across through all the layers, and then we'll be ready to work on our other pieces. So I went ahead and did my seam allowance, and if you noticed, I did not discuss top stitching before I went over to the machine, and that is because top stitching for this center front is going to be a little bit different than it normally is. We have to take into account where we want this pocket piece and which direction our cork pieces have to go in. So when it comes time to top stitch, what you might think is that we're going to push the fabric up, and we're actually not. We just want to push the M, which is the top, upwards. And we're gonna leave our pocket fabric hanging down. So I'm just kind of using my fingers, I'll close those. I did open my zippers as I was sewing. So I'm just gonna clip. You can also add another clip here if you need to. We can just fold that cork down a little bit just to get that in. Now that's ready for top stitching. So I'm gonna top stitch 1/8 inch along here. I am not folding the fabric up. This needs to stay hanging down. When it comes time for the next two pieces, I'll show you very carefully how you're gonna line those up and where this is going to get caught and where it's not. So I'll be right back. This is how your piece is going to look once it's top stitched. So I've got my top stitching just on the M and my pocket fabric is still hanging down. So that's how that's looking so far. So now I need to add my center piece, which is essentially going to be right here on top of that pocket. I need to add that to this side of the zipper, but I don't want to catch this. So now I'm just going to kind of push that up out of the way, just like that. You can add a clip if you want. And I have this lined up, directional. This is my top here. I'm going to take this tape or paper off that I put on there, move my zipper pulls, kind of push those out of the way. And I'm going to flip this up and put this right on the bottom of the zipper. This is the only thing that I'm gonna be sewing through. So once I get this lined up with my tape, I can go ahead over to the machine. I'm just noticing I did not trim my little center. Oops, but that's okay. It's not gonna hurt anything. I'm just lining up on the zipper and I'm ignoring the fact that my tab is overhanging a little bit. That's what happens when you don't pay attention. Okay, so I can actually trim that off right now. There we go. Okay, so that is how it looks from the back. My pocket is clipped out of the way. On the front here, I have my A right side together with the zipper. Technically, it would be going this way. And I'm gonna sew 1/4 inch Then I'm going to pull the A down and I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch, not catching this pocket fabric at all. All right, so here is how the front is looking so far. I did go ahead and place my A piece right sides together with the bottom of the zipper only, not this pocket here, stitched 1/4 of an inch, and then I pulled that seam down and did my top stitching. So here's how it's looking from the back. My fabric is still loose. My zipper is not, my seam is not pushed up into the zipper. It's nice and flat. Did my 1/8 of an inch. So now that I have that all set, now I can pull that pocket fabric down, and it's time to add that to the bottom and get this all finished up. So I've got my C here. My pocket fabric is now down just like it should be. That way, when I open up my zippered pocket, there is my pretty floral fabric. It's in the place where it needs to be. So I'm going to take my piece right here, my C, place that right sides together, and I'm going to sew my 1/4 of an inch and do my 1/8 inch top stitching like I've been doing. This time I will be catching the bottom of the fabric. So I'm just going to add a few clips right here. Once I get this done, I am going to go ahead and do some trimming. Because I have given you extra room in your C pieces, I didn't want them to be too short. As I was testing, they would come up short every so often, so I thought it would just be better to overcut them just a little bit. I like to give you guys wiggle room, also to give me wiggle room. So the C piece is definitely taller than it needs to be. So I am going to do some trimming. So again, let's go over what we're doing here. I have my C right sides together with my A. I've got my pocket fabric pulled down. I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch along here, pull my C down towards the bottom, top stitch 1/8 of an inch. Then I'm going to check the total height. More than likely, unless I have made a really large seam allowance somewhere, I'm going to have to trim off from the bottom. You're trimming about anywhere from 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch, somewhere in that vicinity. If you find that you're trimming a whole lot more, stop and make sure that your measurement is correct. You're going to follow the measurement that's given in the pattern. Once I get that done, I'm also going to go ahead and trim my corners from the C piece. So my corners are going to be down here. I'm doing a few things all at once, and I'll show you kind of as I'm going what's going on. But I'm going to go ahead first and do my 1/4 of an inch and my 1/8 inch top stitching, and then I'll be ready to do all my trimming. I've got my bottom C piece put on. I sewed that right sides together with the A, 1/4 of an inch, pulled it down and did my 1/8 inch top stitching. The last thing that I'm going to do is I made a mark right here down the center so that I can divide my pocket into 2 separate pieces. So we have 1 zipper and 1 pocket, but we're going to make it into 2. And what I normally try to do is I measure from the side the halfway point. But if I don't like where that's lining up, because every so often this is not totally centered, instead of having my line be off a little bit, which will bother me more, I actually kind of line it up right in the middle of what I think is the center here. So I did measure just to check, and mine was just a little bit too far over, and I knew it was going to make me crazy. So I went ahead and I just drew my line centered with the tab in the middle right here. I'm going to go ahead and stitch just down that center. Once that's done, we're going to do a little bit of trimming and we're going to cut our corners. All right, so I've got that all stitched, and I'm just going to get rid of my line. I just stitched it once, but if you want to stitch it twice just to make it more secure, that is totally fine. It's up to you. And I'm just kind of getting those little bit of mark. There we go. Get that all off. So that goes through all the layers. So there is the back of my pocket. So now I have 2 separate pockets. And I think I had mentioned this in the beginning. I also tell you this in the pattern. I just love that. If you don't want the 2 pockets, if this is just not your thing and you'd rather just have 1 big pocket, you can skip the tab in the middle. You don't have to put that on. Use your zipper and add your K pieces just like you did. Just go right to that step. And you can do a single or a double pull zipper. I did one when I was kind of in the testing phase where it was a single pocket and I did a double pull zipper. It's not necessary, but it just looked really pretty. So if you want, you can do whatever you would like. You don't have to make any major adjustments except skip the tab and obviously don't sew down the middle. Other than that, you can do it however you would like. So now that this is all set, what I also did on my way back over is I trimmed my height. My height here needs to be as per the pattern, and there is some overage that is accounted for in your bottom C pieces, just because when I was making them smaller, as I was kind of writing and testing out the pattern, every so often my height was not coming out right. And since everyone's 1/4 of an inch is different and things shift around, especially when there's thick seams, I figured it was better to be over and then trim than to be under and be unhappy. So this is all that I trimmed off from the bottom. Any of my overage is always gonna come from the bottom C pieces. This is less than a 1/2 inch. It's maybe 3/8 of an inch. So not a whole lot. Once I got that done, on the back here, I marked using my box corner template, and I marked as per the pattern. So I checked my measurement there. Remember, these corners are going to be larger than the ones in the original Lola because that bag is smaller than this one. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut these. And all of this is in the pattern for you. For step 3B, we're going to be making the scoop pocket for the back. So to start out, you're going to want your piece I as well as your piece O, that's your lining piece. And then you're going to need your template in the back. This piece is the same exact size as the H piece, so if you grab that one instead, it doesn't matter. If you have a particular print that you really want on the outside, you'd want to use that one because this is the scoop pocket, which sits right on the outside. It faces outward. So I'm going to take both of these and my template, and I'm going to do a little bit of trimming. And the first thing I'm going to do here is just fold my piece in half, just like this. And then it says that I need to place this on the fold. I don't have a directional cork, so it doesn't matter to me. If you do, make sure that this is the top. Make sure that you're cutting it with the top up. That's where your scoop is. We wouldn't want to have anything, trees or animals, etc., upside down. So I am just gonna go ahead and clip this because I am going to cut this with my rotary cutter. If you would prefer, you can mark it with your scissors and do it that way. You can also make 2 copies of this template and you can tape them together so that you have a full template if you find that easier. I find that a half template works just fine for me. And this is just a scoop pocket. If I mess this up and it's a little bit off, as long as these 2 pieces are cut the same, it's not the end of the world. Our scoop pockets don't have to be exactly the same. I'm gonna do the same with this piece. So I'm just gonna run over to the cutting mat real quick and get these cut. All right, I'm back with both of my pieces. Here is another little tip for you. If you are working with something that doesn't have a lot of stability to it, if you have a piece of like lightweight cotton fabric and it's a little bit harder for you to cut, you can mark it and cut it with scissors, or you can place these kind of back to back or even right sides together, and you can put the cork on the top when you cut with your rotary cutter. It will keep the fabric from shifting around. That's something I usually do when I'm using Essex linen, especially because it's a loose weave and it kind of scoots around. But now that I have these both cut, I'm going to take my 2 pieces and put them right sides together, just like this. And it doesn't matter if they're 100% perfect because the seam allowance will hide a lot of our mistakes. So if your cutting is so-so, that's okay. Go ahead and just clip that. So the only part that I'm going to be sewing, editing note here, I'm about to show you how to sew these pieces. Everything I tell you is correct except do not sew the short ends right here. Not sure why I told you that, but please ignore it. You are just sewing the curve. All right, back to the program. Across my scoop and right over here. Make sure that I backstitch. I'm gonna sew with a 1/4 of an inch seam. When I'm done, we'll talk about clipping our curves and turning it so we can get it top stitched. So now that I have done all of my stitching on my curve here, I'm gonna take my scissors and I'm just going to make some little snips right here, which I've already done. And that's just gonna help to turn the curve. Once I have that finished, I'm gonna turn this right side out, and you can press this at the iron or you can finger press. What I tend to do is kind of press back and then add some clips. I find that that helps me, especially because this fabric in particular is a little bit stiffer than, let's say, an Essex linen or a quilter's cotton. So it just takes a little bit more finagling. So I am just going to use my clips to hold everything. And I'm really just trying to get the cleanest, smoothest curve that I can. Just kind of working my way around. Once I get past the little bit of a curve, it's straight and it's much easier. And then I can just kind of roll that between my fingers. Come back over here. You do whatever is most comfortable and easiest for you. This works pretty well for me, regardless of the fabric. So now that I have that kind of pressed and ready to go, I'm gonna head back to the machine and top stitch 1/8 of an inch just on that curve. I've got my scoop pocket all prepared. I did my top stitching right along here. These raw edges on the rest of the pocket are going to be in the seam allowance, so I didn't have to worry about those. There's my fabric on the back. So I'm going to place my pocket, which is now finished, on piece H. These should be the same height and width. The only difference is the scoop. So once I get that lined up on all the corners, I'm going to add a few clips. And at the machine, I'm just going to base this about 1/8 of an inch just to keep it where I want it so it doesn't shift around. And I'm just gonna go down the sides and across the bottom. Once I have my 1/8 inch stitching done, I'm gonna grab my J pieces, and those are going to be for the side. So in order to make this the same width as the front, which is what it needs to be, but also to make sure my pocket wasn't so big that it was kind of useless and too floppy, I made it a little bit shorter, and then I'm gonna finish up the sides. So I'm gonna stitch this 1/8 of an inch, then take my J pieces and put one on either side, just like that. Stitch 1/4 of an inch all the way down, open those up like I did on the zipper, and I'm going to do my top stitching 1/8 of an inch. My back center is all set. I have my scoop pocket sewn on. It's almost camouflage. You might not even be able to see it, but that piece is sewn on to my H piece, which is the center. I also took my J pieces, I put those right side down, stitched 1/4 of an inch, and then I opened them out and I top stitched 1/8 of an inch. Before I added those on, I did base this to the H piece using 1/8 inch stitching, which you'll see down here. I did that on the sides as well. I just like to do that to make sure it's not gonna shift when I'm adding these pieces. Once this is done, double check your measurement here. This should be the measurement as per the pattern, which is the same as your C and your M pieces, or your M and your C, excuse me. We want to make sure that all of our pieces are the same width and all ready to go. In order to finish this up, you're just going to be adding your top M and your bottom C, sewing them 1/4 of an inch, folding them, and doing your top stitching 1/8. So I'm just going to take my bottom here. Again, I lay them out so I can see which direction they're going to be in the bag. And I want to make sure that anything directional is taken into account. So I'm going to take my bottom, kind of flip that up. I'll add some clips. Your seams down here on the bottom edge and a little bit up here are going to get a little bit bulky, but because we're adding these top and bottom strips, it's going to keep that away from the final seam and the final top stitching, which can be a little bit messy. So we want to keep some of that bulk kind of in the center of the bag. So when you're sewing, just be aware of that. I'm going to take my M and flip that over as well, right sides together. My scoop is right here, so M is going on the top. It's the top of the bag. Getting this all lined up. All right, so once again, now that this is all clipped, I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch across here, making sure to back stitch. Same on the bottom. I'm going to fold the M up, and I'm going to pull the C down, and then I'm going to do my 1/8 inch top stitching. So here's how the back is looking. It's all set. Just like I did on the front, when I was done doing all of my sewing and top stitching, I checked my height measurement and I trimmed off any excess from the bottom. It was probably about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. So you're gonna do the same trimming you did on the front. I also cut my corners just like I did on the front. I used my box corner template and marked those and cut them with scissors. This is all set now, so I am ready to start doing my assembly now that my front and my back as well as my handle is all set. So I've got all of my outside pieces done, and I'm going to now follow steps 5 and 6 in the original pattern. 5 is going to show you how to put your pieces together to complete the outside. 6 is going to discuss getting your handle finish. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and follow the pattern. This is in the original Lola. So again, it's not in the add-on, and I'm not going to do a full assembly tutorial for you right here, but I'm going to go ahead and get these pieces all done. I'm also going to work on my lining, and I'll show you in the next clip how I'm going to do that and some of the things that you can do differently. All of your finishing instructions will be found in the original Lola. So we're going to move on to step 9, which in the original pattern is going to be for cotton, and it's going to be talking about making our recessed zipper. So instead today we're going to use cork for that. Because we had some extra cork, we might as well. If you are not a fan of this, or if you just want to do maybe cork on the top and something else on the bottom, I could use my lining fabric if I want. You could do that as well. This is just showing you a different option. So when it comes to doing your fabric for a recessed zipper, something cotton that's going to fray, you're going to be doing a little bit different technique in how you prepare your strips. For today, we actually have a simple prep. After they're cut, on the back, we're just adding 1 strip of tape to 1 long edge. So before I can add these strips on, I do need to curve the edges of my zipper. This is where the zipper is opening, so I just pulled those 2 sides apart. And I'm just going to, I kind of fold it back and then bring it forward, just like that. Try to get a little up close with that. I'm just curving the edge of my zipper away from the pull. So I fold it back and then kind of pull it forward, just making a little tuck, just like that. And that's how my sides look. I'm going to take this to the machine and just add a few stitches so that doesn't come undone. When that's done, we'll be able to add these pieces on. I've got my zipper all set to go. I did my stitching at the machine. What I'm going to do now is kind of close that as far as it's going to go, just so I can visually see where I want to place my cork strips. I've got all of my G strips with a piece of tape on the back, just on one of these long edges. You can put some on the other sides and the short ends if it helps you. It really isn't going to make any difference. What I want to do here is get this lined up. I'm trying to do a few things at once. I want to not be so close to the zipper teeth that my pull gets caught. I need to give myself some room. I also want it to be even and straight with the zipper teeth. And down at the curved end, I want it to go over the curve. I want to make sure that I'm not seeing any of this right here. That's why it really doesn't matter if this isn't super neat. So I want to go right over top of that. Once I have that done, I'm going to do my other side. I like to do the front and then the back, and I think the back's even easier. So just going to line this up. Now I'm trying to line up this end, also give my pull some room, and try to keep it about the same distance from the zipper as the other one. Before I do anything, I just check. It opens perfect. And actually, I'm just gonna leave that open. I think it's a little easier when I flip this over to do it this way. Take this paper off. And now I just need to line this up. Line up this edge and that edge. Line up the bottom right here. Since these are cut exactly the same and I'm lining up my edges, my top stitching should be a piece of cake. So the last one doesn't want to go. There we go. All right, line that up. All right, at the sewing machine, I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch around each of these halves. I'm going to keep my zipper open because I don't want to sew over the zipper this way and get in the way of the pull. I just want to do 1/8 of an inch around this box and 1/8 of an inch around this box. This needs to be separate so it opens. Once I have that complete, I'm going to get the lining ready to start assembling. I'm not going to do a full assembly for this video, but I will show you where you can add this piece in. And also, if you want to sub out some cork for the top of your lining, how you can do that. So here is my recessed zipper. It is all set for now. It's ready to be added into the lining. The only thing left to do on this is to do something for the end here because we don't want our pull to come off. You can make a little tab out of cork if you would like, or fabric. I am going to grab a zipper end, which I did not show in the beginning because I was kind of deciding what I wanted to do, but I'm just going to grab a zipper end and add that onto here. Now that this is done, we can start prepping the lining pieces to add this in. I have my lining D pieces as well as my recessed zipper. I'm just going to talk to you briefly about the assembly steps and a few things that are different. You're going to refer back to your original Lola pattern, and on page 9, step 10 is going to start talking about assembling the lining. So first you're going to be doing some trimming from your lining, then you will be adding your divider, which I did not make, and then you will be doing the rest of your finishing. The add-on pattern does not have any of these steps included. So what you're going to do first, I've trimmed my corners just like I did on the outside, and I've also trimmed my strips from the top. In the pattern, it's going to give you this measurement, and that is going to stay the same. You're going to trim the same exact height as the original one. Even though it's a smaller bag, it still works for this. What is different for this one, and this is a choice that you get to make, if you would like, you can replace these thin strips with cork if you want to. Now, you're not throwing these out. If you remember, if you've done this one or another one that I have with a recessed zipper, you know that your zipper is actually going to be sandwiched in between the bottom part that may or may not have pockets and the strip right here. If you want the entire top of your bag, everything that's showing, to be cork, you can sub these out. You'll just cut the same measurement, same width and height from cork. Keep in mind, if you do that, your final top stitching is going to be very thick. You're going to want to be real careful with that. A few things that you can do to avoid having skip stitches or broken needles. Number one is that you can top stitch further down if you're okay with how that looks. If you get further past the 1/4 inch seam allowance, you're not going to be catching that double bulk. Basically, when you have your top, it's going to be kind of folded down, and then you have your outside and your lining and the seam allowance. If you can top stitch further away from that, you're not going to be catching it, and it's going to be easier on your machine. If you want to top stitch higher up, like I do, I usually do 1/8 of an inch. What you can also do is avoid the sides where you have possibly cork here. You have your cork handles and tab, and then you also have cork on the outside, plus your lining and everything else that you're catching. There's definitely some options. I'm gonna let my machine tell me, and if I feel like the top, especially on the sides, is too thick, I'm just not gonna top stitch there. I'll do a nice line on the front and back, and I'll be okay with that. So for today, I'm not gonna sub these out, but you definitely can, and I have in some of the samples as well. So I'm gonna hang on to these. I'm gonna follow steps 10 through 12 for my assembly, and I'll be back to show you how my bag looks completed. I'm back and my bag is all finished, so let's go ahead and take a look. I finished the outside, front, and back. I also had my handle done, so then I followed the instructions in the original Lola pattern. I assembled my outside with my handles. Then I went ahead and assembled my lining. Again, in the pattern, and I did not do so in this video, there is a divider and there is a zippered pocket. There's full instructions for those in the original video as well as in the original tutorial if you need any help with those. For today, I did not do that. I just chose to skip the pockets altogether, so my lining is plain inside. I did do the recessed zipper out of cork on the top and bottom. And I did not put the cork here up at the top. I decided just to use my fabric because I like how that little bit of the floral popping out looked. If you want to do all cork, you would sub your strips right here that you're going to cut to make room for your recessed zipper. You would sub those with cork. So you would go ahead, trim those fabric strips, get rid of those, and then just replace those with a cork strip of the same size. Then you would have cork kind of going around right here, around the top, and really the only lining you would see is maybe just a little bit here on the ends. Once I was finished with that, I also did my top stitching. So let's talk about top stitching because that can be a little bit tricky, especially with a bag like this where it gets a little bit thick. On the front here and on the back, it's really not so bad, not any worse than any normal bag. You have your cork on the front, your cork or possibly fabric, either or on the back, and you just have a couple layers to go through, excuse me. But because this seam right here is really close, you're not sewing through that, but it's kind of in the way. Like I can feel it right here. It can be a little bit bulky just to kind of get around it and finger press around. On your sides, however, you have that, but you also have the thickness of your strap and your tab. Your tab is adding 4 layers and your strap is adding 3. So if you have the type of machine that's just not going to be happy with that, and I have a heavy duty machine, and even sometimes on there, it's not that it won't go through it. I will get skip stitches and it just doesn't look great. It's not my best sewing. So what I did, and to show you how it would look, is I just started and stopped on either side of the handle, and I did the same thing with the tab. I am totally fine with that. It's not affecting anything. And if you feel like, well, this should be stronger, or I should do something here, you could absolutely just add a rivet there and do the same thing on this side. So on this side, there's my stitching. It's not even the same exact distance, and I'm okay with it. I'm okay with this not being 100% perfect, because when I look at it from the front, I just see top stitching. I'm not seeing that it doesn't go all the way to the edge. So use that to your advantage if that's something that helps you. If you're still unsure of the thickness, let me show you the bag that I had showed you in the very beginning. That one's right here. For this bag, I didn't even add the handles when I was doing my assembly. So I assembled my outside and my lining. I did my recessed zipper, again with the cork, and I left the lining fabric showing. I did my top stitching all the way around, and when it was done, I added my handle. So I just riveted right through the sides. A couple of tips that I will give you if you want to do that technique. Number one is to make sure that your rivet posts are long enough. I used 8mm posts, and they worked, but they weren't my favorite. They were super, super tight, and I know that my fingers hurt now, and it's going to frustrate anyone else that tries it. So I would say to get at least a 9 or possibly a 10mm long post. You want to make sure that your post can go through all these layers and that you have enough room to add your cap to it. So for me, it got through, but it was not the easiest task. Also, what you want to do, and I would highly suggest marking, is not putting your handle right over the seam. This looks like it is. It looks pretty centered, but it's actually not. My post is actually going through on the side of the seam. That's where my hole is. So it's in the middle of my strap, but it's not in the middle of that seam, because we don't want to weaken or affect that seam, since it's kind of the main seam of the bag. So now that you've seen a few options, I hope that you will give the Lola XL pattern a try. I'm very excited to see your bags. Don't forget to post on social media and to tag me. I'm on Instagram. We have 2 Facebook groups. And of course, you can always email me a picture. I love seeing those. So if you liked videos like this, don't forget to click subscribe, hit the notification bell, and give it a thumbs up. Thanks for joining me.